My name is Dr. Maren Welles. I'm 34 years old, an OB-GYN at a private hospital in Seattle, and the oldest of 3 children. For most of my life, I believed that being the firstborn meant I had a purpose, someone to hold the weight when others faltered, someone to rise early and stay late, someone to be dependable, consistent, and invisible when necessary. I carried that role with pride, until one day I realized in my family, being strong only made me easier to erase. The night of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration. At least, that's what the engraved gold invitation said, though mine never arrived. I heard about the dinner from a cousin's Facebook post and texted my mother to confirm. Her response was a curt, "Of course you're welcome, if you're not busy delivering babies." Still, I showed up, alone. In navy heels and a plum-sheath dress, I picked carefully something respectful but not too formal. When I arrived at the upscale restaurant in Bellevue, the host couldn't find my name on the seating chart. "Try under Wells," I offered, smiling, while guests filtered in behind me. "I'm the daughter." After a long pause and a whispered exchange with the manager, they led me to a seat next to the bathroom. Literally, my place card was a blank tent with a hastily scribbled Maren in ballpoint pen. No title, no last name. No one at the table acknowledged me. I sipped from my water glass and nodded politely as the toast began. My younger brother, Jace investment banker, favorite child. Walking charm offensive was the star of every anecdote. My sister Lana, ever the darling with her Etsy shop and handmade napkin rings, received her share of praise too. When the laughter subsided, I leaned over and asked softly, "Is it true that the equity investment Dad made in the Sandport property was signed over to you both? I thought that was something we'd all share." Jace didn't blink. "You left. Remember? You chose your job. You don't get to choose the inheritance too." I blinked back. "I never left the family. I just moved out of state." Mom chimed in with a smirk. "Just because you catch babies doesn't mean you know how to behave at dinner, dear." I opened my mouth to respond calmly, just to clarify, but Jace, without a word, raised his glass of red wine and poured it over my lap. The table gasped. I froze, crimson spreading down my dress like accusation. He smiled like it was a joke. No apology came. I stood up, shaking. No one followed. No one intervened. I walked to the restroom, locked the door, and peeled off the soaked fabric. In my trunk, I had a clean lab coat, white, crisp, dependable. I put it on, tucked my hair into a bun, and walked back into that ballroom like I was reporting for a double shift. I didn't say a word, but I pressed record on my phone and slid it beneath the charger on the wall. Every conversation from that point on was documented, because I would need it. The audio from the banquet still echoed in my phone's memory as I pulled into the garage beneath my apartment that night. My dress, now hanging from a plastic bag in the back seat, still smelled faintly of Pinot Noir and humiliation. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I simply walked into my building, changed into scrubs, and went in for my 3 shift at the hospital. But the silence didn't leave me alone. It followed me. I don't remember what triggered the memory. Maybe it was the cold snap in the air the next morning, or the scratch of wool against my skin. But suddenly I was 15 again, locked outside in the backyard in the dead of a Seattle winter. The frost was already forming along the patio stones. My fingers had gone numb from pounding the glass door, my voice hoarse from shouting apologies I didn't mean. My father's words rang like a verdict. "If you can't speak with respect, you don't get to speak at all." My mother had brought me a blanket, not to warm me, just to muffle the sound. I sat in my kitchen, coffee cold in my hands, and opened my inbox. There it was, a single line in an email from our family attorney, addressed to Jace, Lana, and me. But only their names were highlighted in the formal language that followed. "All shares of the Sandport equity and joint property assets have been transferred to Mr. Jace Welles and Ms. Lila Welles, as per Mr. and Mrs. Wells's updated testamentary arrangement, in recognition of their ongoing commitment to the family legacy and personal stability. I reread it 3 times, looking for an error, a footnote, a follow-up. There was none. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deliberately written out. I forwarded the email to myself, then to a private folder labeled Legal. Then I got in my car. It was raining when I pulled into my parents' driveway. Their porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the hedges. I didn't have a speech planned. I only knew I needed to ask why not to plead, just to witness how easily they would look away when confronted. My mother opened the door. Her eyes narrowed. "I just need 5 minutes," I said. She stepped aside without a word. The house smelled like lemon polish and roasted garlic. Dad sat in his usual recliner, scrolling through his tablet. Jace stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, like he'd been waiting for me. I stayed standing. I saw the legal documents. No one looked surprised. "I'd like to understand the reasoning," I said, calm and clear. "We were told the property would be split equally. Now, I'm cut out entirely." Jace chuckled, still on that. "Huh. You left, Maren. You made your choice." My voice didn't rise. "I left to study, to become a doctor. I still came back for holidays. For Mom's surgery. For Dad's angiogram." Mom folded her arms. "And yet, you never stayed. Never invested in us. Always too busy playing savior somewhere else. That's not fair." I said, "I took out loans so you didn't have to mortgage the lake house when Dad had that second operation." "That's what family does," Jace snapped. "You don't get a prize for doing the bare minimum." I took a step back, hurt, blooming behind my ribs. "So this is about control, not contribution?" That's when it happened. One moment, Jace was sipping his drink. The next, his fist cracked into my mouth with a force that sent me reeling. I hit the edge of the counter, slid to the floor, copper flooding my tongue. I saw stars, heard the clatter of his glass on the floor. Then silence. I looked up. My mother didn't move. My father didn't blink. "It's always a scene with you," Mom said, her tone bored. "You provoke, you escalate, and then cry victim." Blood trickled down my chin. I pulled my phone from my pocket, fumbling to unlock it, but it was dead. No, it was disabled. I turned it over. The battery slot was empty. Looking for this. My mother held it up between 2 fingers. I stared at her. "You took the battery out. I didn't want you to embarrass yourself." "You mean, embarrass you?" My father spoke for the first time. "You're making this harder than it has to be. Maybe you should go." I pushed myself up, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. My lips were swelling fast. "No need." I said, "I'm done here." I walked out, rain mixing with blood, the taste of iron bitter behind my teeth. Back at the hospital, I let the automatic doors close behind me like a final seal. I passed through triage, barely registering the bustle around me. In the staff lounge, I took out a suture kit and stitched my lower lip myself, hand steady despite the tremor in my chest. Then I opened the internal reporting portal and filed an incident under staff wellness assault by sibling. Medical attention required. No family support. Incident occurred at private residence. I attached photos. Then I copied the report into my encrypted folder. I named it Exhibit 2, the punch that proved everything. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as I sat in the staff break room, lips stitched and bandaged, skin still sore from the impact. The taste of blood had finally faded, but the ache in my ribs remained like a shadow that refused to lift. I told no one. I didn't want concern. I wanted clarity. So I went home. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop, opened a blank spreadsheet, and typed a title into cell A1, Timeline of Silence. I didn't stop. Not for hours. I charted it like I would a patient file, only this time. The patient was me. Age 7, locked in the hallway closet for sulking after being denied birthday cake. Age 9, spanked with a leather belt by Dad for interrupting Jace's piano recital. Age 12, Given detention for faking injury when I limped into class with a fractured toe, Jace caused by slamming a door. Age 15, isolated outside in freezing rain. Age 18, refused financial support for college after receiving a scholarship offer Dad didn't approve of. Age 21, cut from family Christmas card photo for not being photogenic enough. Age 27, removed from will revisions, without notice. Age 34, punched in the mouth. No one blinked. Each line made my fingers tremble more than the last, but I kept typing. I color-coded by severity. I added footnotes. I linked images. The facts were no longer scattered memories. They were now a record, an architecture of cruelty masked as parenting, neglect masquerading as discipline. Around midnight, I opened my digital archives, buried deep in an old folder named MedRex09. I found it the X-ray from 2009 when I had a fractured rib after Jace kicked me during a fight about college. I'd said I wanted to leave for Boston. He'd said I was abandoning the family. He shoved me hard against the staircase railing. The image showed the clean fracture line across my 8th rib. I remember telling the ER nurse I'd fallen while running. I remember her glance, the pause, but she said nothing. No one ever did. I pulled the file into the folder now labeled Witness Doc MW. It wasn't enough, so I searched for more. Old journals, photos, scans of awards I'd won that never got framed, medical records, notes from classmates asking, "Are you okay?" from days I came to school with bruises on my arms or shadows under my eyes. Around 2 my phone buzzed. It was Lana. "Do you have to make everything a big deal?" I stared at the screen. Not "Are you okay?" Not what happened. Just a reminder I was still the one blamed for disrupting the family image. I didn't respond. But I opened a new tab in my document and titled it Reactions to Harm, Witnesses and Enablers. Lana was the first entry. I didn't cry. I just breathed in deeper than I had in weeks. The next morning, a voicemail came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it, but something made me pause. "Hello, this is Mrs. Helms. I don't know if you remember me, 8th grade literature. I heard what happened from one of the nurses I mentor now. I've wanted to reach out for years." I held the phone to my chest. She continued, "I filed a concern back then, when you came to class with a bruised eye. I tried, but the principal shut it down. Said your parents were generous donors. He warned me not to stir trouble." I sat down on the floor. My knees buckled, not from shock but relief. "I'm sorry I didn't push harder. Maren, you were a good student, quiet, but I saw something in your writing. If you ever want a statement or support," I kept the original form I submitted. Her voice cracked. Then the message ended. She saw me. Back then, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't dramatic. I reopened my documentation folder and created a subfile external witnesses. Mrs. Helms's name was the first. Then I dug deeper into my cloud backups, old devices, even that dusty thumb drive I'd almost thrown away. One by one, I reconstructed what had been denied, gaslit, or buried. Photos from my 18th birthday. I wasn't in them. A voicemail from my college roommate asking why my mom always hung up when she called. A medical receipt for an urgent care visit from the time Jace slammed a door on my hand. I saved everything. I built it like a case file, because that's what it was. A case against silence, against erasure, against a legacy that told me I was too much, too sensitive, too loud when in truth, I was simply surviving. By dawn, I had indexed every file. I exported a backup to a secure drive. Then, I renamed the folder Witness Doc MW Vault by The Evidence of a Daughter Never Counted. The folder sat open on my screen, its name like a final declaration, The Evidence of a Daughter Never Counted. I thought that was the end, my quiet rebellion complete, my voice finally written into the record. But the past, it seemed, wasn't content to stay archived. It had found a new target. Her name was Lila, 9 years old, a cousin's daughter, technically not even close family, but When her mother deployed overseas, my parents had offered to take her in for a few months. I hadn't thought much of it. Until Jenna called. Jenna had been my college roommate, one of the few people who ever noticed the bruises I never explained. We'd drifted apart over the years. But when her niece, Lila, ended up in my childhood home, Jenna remembered too much to stay silent. Her voice shook through the phone. "Maren, I think something's wrong." My chest tightened. "What happened?" Lila came home from school today and said, Jace made her kneel on the laundry room tiles for 2 hours because she knocked over a glass of water. She was sobbing. She said her knees hurt. I asked why she didn't tell your mom, and she said, "Grandma told me not to act like Aunt Maren. Drama makes things worse." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The words were exact. The phrases I'd heard 1,000 times. The ones that made me question my sanity. Don't be like Maren. Don't overreact. Don't start drama. It was happening again, only this time. It wasn't me. It was a child, a little girl, and they were already shaping her silence. She said Jace told her she needed to learn discipline. Jenna added. Said if she told anyone, he'd take her cat away. I stood up, the air gone from the room. The walls of my apartment felt suddenly too narrow. Has she shown any marks? Any bruising? No, Jenna whispered. But she's scared. She doesn't want to go back after the weekend. I didn't know who else to call. You called the right person. I said, "Thank you." After we hung up, I sat in front of my laptop for nearly an hour. The files were still there. Photos, audio, testimonies. But this time, the question wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about being believed or vindicated. It was about stopping a pattern that had outlived its source and now threatened to grow new roots. Do I stay quiet to protect the facade, the fragile house of cards they still called family, or do I become the woman I needed when I was Lila's age? The decision wasn't hard. Not anymore. 2 nights later, I showed up at Jace's birthday dinner. The same restaurant where the wine stains still lingered on the carpet from our last celebration. This time, I wore black tailored slacks, blouse buttoned to the collar, no jewelry. I didn't come to perform. I came to deliver. They were all there. Jace, smug in his seat at the head of the table. My mother, arranging silverware as though the world hadn't cracked. My father, sipping his whiskey with one hand while scanning the room like he owned it. I didn't wait for the toast. I walked up and placed 3 envelopes on the white linen tablecloth, each sealed, each marked with a name, Jace. Elaine, Thomas. Jace raised an eyebrow. Is this a cease and desist letter, or are you finally moving to Canada? I didn't blink. Those are copies of a formal warning. You have 72 hours to respond. Respond to what my father said, half laughing. I leaned forward, quiet but clear. To what you've done, to what you allowed. There are photos, there are recordings, there are witnesses ready to testify under oath. I have statements from a former teacher, a licensed physician, and 3 neighbors. If you want to test me, go ahead. My mother opened her envelope. Her fingers trembled slightly. I saw it. Inside was a printed document, my digital report, screenshots, audio transcript, and Lila's own words. At the bottom, the number of a child protection attorney. You don't scare us, Jace said, jaw tight. I'm not trying to. I replied, I'm just done playing dead. He stood, knocking over a glass. It shattered against the floor. Everyone turned. A waiter rushed over. My father muttered, "Can we not make this a scene?" I looked at them, these people who had raised me, ignored me, rewritten my life as if I'd never existed. You have 72 hours, I said again, to make a statement, to apologize, to tell the truth. My voice never rose, but every head at the table dipped slightly, like something heavier than gravity had entered the room. And if we don't, my mother asked, her voice brittle. Then I'll say it for you, I said. I walked out without waiting for dessert. The night was cold and dry. As I opened my car door, I could almost hear Lila's small voice in the back of my mind. Don't cry like Aunt Maren. No, sweetheart, I thought, not anymore. Now we speak. They didn't respond within 72 hours. No statement, no apology, no denial. Just silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, but loaded, like a room holding its breath before an explosion. I waited until the deadline passed. Then I dressed with precision black dress pants, my white doctor's coat, and a small silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a knot. Something that once represented restraint. Now, resilience. The community school board meeting was held at the Civic Auditorium downtown, a stiff, fluorescent-lit chamber where teachers, parents, and board members gathered for procedural applause. On the agenda that evening, commendations for local families who had demonstrated exceptional commitment to child welfare and community support. The Welles family, my family, was set to receive the final award. I arrived early and sat near the back. People shuffled in, holding programs and lukewarm coffee. My parents sat at the front, perfectly posed, my mother in pearl earrings and a navy dress, my father in a charcoal blazer he reserved for donor dinners. Jace stood near the stage with his hands in his pockets, smirking like he already owned the room. None of them saw me. The chairwoman began the ceremony with rehearsed words. Few families exemplify generational service and family strength quite like the Welleses. She listed their donations to school programs, their years on parent-teacher committees, their steadfast role in raising future leaders. When she asked if anyone would like to say a few words before the plaque was presented, I stood. Chairs creaked, heads turned. My mother whipped around. My voice was steady. Yes, I have something to say. I walked slowly toward the podium, my shoes echoing across the linoleum floor. I didn't look at my family. Not yet. I inserted a USB into the board's laptop, clicked the file labeled Lila Audio 01.mp3, and pressed play. The sound filled the room, a child's voice, trembling. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spill it. Please don't make me kneel again. Please, I'll be good. And then, colder, my mother's voice. If you cry again like Maren, you'll spend the whole day in that room. We don't raise weak girls here. Silence. Then the murmuring began. Gasps. A hand over a mouth. Someone in the front row whispered, "Did she just say that I looked at the board? My name is Dr. Maren Welles. I am the eldest daughter of the family you are about to honor. What you heard was recorded 2 weeks ago. That's my niece. She is 9 years old. She lives with my parents. That voice you heard belongs to the woman in the navy dress, sitting in the front row. No one moved. I have documentation," I continued. "Medical records, witness statements, photographs, police reports. You'll find them all in the files I submitted to your review board earlier today." I paused, then added, "But honestly, you don't need a file. You heard it for yourself." The room cracked open. Mrs. Haverford, my old 4th grade teacher, stood. "I saw Maren come to school with a split lip in 5th grade, she said softly. "I remember. I reported it. No one followed up. Then Mr. Jennings, our former neighbor, cleared his throat. Every Saturday morning, I'd hear yelling, slamming doors. I thought someone else would say something. More people stood. A nurse I'd worked with, a coach from Jace's old football team. Bit by bit, the silence broke apart like a dam finally giving way. My father stood suddenly, face flushed. He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket and strode toward the podium. "She's mentally unstable," he said, waving the paper. "Diagnosed 3 years ago. Paranoid episodes. I have the documentation." I didn't flinch. From the back of the room, a woman's voice rang out. "That's a lie." All heads turned. Dr. Eliza Monroe, my supervising physician at the hospital, rose with deliberate calm. I am the doctor listed on that form, she said, and I can confirm publicly that this record has been altered. Dr. Welles was treated for a physical injury, not a psychological episode. That file is falsified. The room erupted. Whispers turned into outrage. The board chair stood, eyes wide. Is this true? She asked quietly. I stepped forward. He tried to erase me with a fake diagnosis. I said, just like he erased bruises and birthdays and me. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small glass teacup, transparent, delicate, cracked along one edge. This is mine, I said. My mother threw it at me when I told her I was leaving for med school. She said it shattered because I dropped it. But I saved it. Not because it's pretty, but because I always knew I'd need to prove it existed. I set it on the podium gently. It didn't break. But unlike this cup, I said, I didn't stay broken. Security entered the room quietly. 2 officers approached my parents. No one stopped them. My mother looked pale. My father clenched his fists but said nothing. As they were escorted out, I scanned the crowd. Near the exit, I saw her, Lila, tiny, arms wrapped around a book bag, staring with wide, solemn eyes. I met her gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. But she nodded, just once. For the first time in my life, I felt the light shift, not onto me, but off of them. And that was enough. 2 days after the board meeting, formal charges were filed. My parents were arrested for child endangerment, falsification of medical records, and obstruction of mandated reporting. The news trickled out slowly, carried in quiet headlines and whispered questions at church gatherings, parent-teacher events, and neighborhood brunches. But I didn't follow the coverage. I didn't need to see it. I'd already lived it. What mattered now was what came next. The morning after the arrest, I sat in the office of Jeanette Klein, my attorney sharp-minded, meticulous, and calm even when the world wasn't. She slid a folder across her polished desk. The state has temporarily placed Lila in foster care, but we've filed for your emergency guardianship. Given your documentation, testimony, and the public nature of the case, we expect it to be approved within days. I opened the folder. Pages of petitions, affidavits, and official letters stared back at me, stamped and notarized. Among them, a clause I'd requested myself permanent no-contact order between Lila and my parents. No letters, I said. No phone calls, no exceptions. Jeanette nodded. It's done. I left her office and walked out into an afternoon washed in soft amber light. There was no celebration in the street, no parade, just a quiet warmth that filled my lungs more deeply than I'd felt in years. For the first time, it felt like I could exhale. That evening, a young reporter, probably not much older than one of my interns, caught me outside Lila's elementary school. She was holding a microphone and a recorder, not with ambition, but with something close to reverence. Dr. Welles, she asked, why now? Why speak after all these years? I looked past her to the empty swings, the sidewalk chalk smeared into soft colors by little hands. Because no one ever asked how I was doing, I said simply. They only asked how I made the family look. She lowered her mic. Her eyes were wet. I didn't say more. 2 days later, I picked Lila up from the temporary shelter. She came out holding a paper bag of belongings and a worn-out stuffed otter with one button eye. I crouched beside her. Hi, sweetheart. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She just reached for my hand. At home. I led her to the kitchen and opened a small white box I'd hidden in the cupboard. Inside was a porcelain teacup, white with tiny blue forget-me-nots curling around its rim. No cracks, no hairline fractures, no hidden threats. It's yours now, I said. You can use it for cocoa or tea, whenever you want. You don't need permission. She turned it in her hands slowly. It's really mine, really yours. She set it carefully on the table like it might carry something sacred. Maybe it did. That night, After Lila fell asleep in the room I'd repainted soft green, I stood in my living room, staring at my own chipped teacup, the one from years ago. I placed it next to hers on a shelf, side by side. 2 cups, one broken, one whole, both seen now. Later. I sat at my desk and opened a new journal. Its leather cover freshly pressed, its pages untouched. On the first line, I wrote, "They never hit me hard enough to kill me, just hard enough to silence me." But now, I speak for every child still learning the language of pain. I closed the cover gently, let the weight of it settle. Then I turned off the lamp, walked into the hallway, and checked Lila's door one last time. She was curled beneath her blanket, arms wrapped around her otter, the teacup resting on her bedside table like a quiet promise. And I knew this was not the end. It was the reclamation. I once believed survival meant staying quiet long enough for others to love you again. But now I know the truth. Love that demands your silence isn't love, and belonging that requires your disappearance isn't home. My worth never lived in the hands that withheld it. It never belonged to their acceptance, their approval, or the roles they wrote for me. It was always mine. I no longer need to prove it, not to them, not to anyone. I set the teacup down, straightened my coat, and walked through the doorway, not as someone broken leaving something behind, but as someone whole, stepping fully into her own space, because dignity cannot be taken, and real worth needs no recognition to exist.